deterred immigrants from reporting crimes. And in New York, former Police Commissioner Bernard Kerik has been jailed ahead of 3 criminal trials on corruption, conspiracy, and tax fraud charges. On Tuesday, Judge Stephen Robinson revoked Kerik's bail and ordered him detained for allegedly releasing sealed information in an attempt to win public sympathy. A Kerik associate had sent the sealed material to the Washington Times in the hopes that news coverage would cast doubt on the prosecution's case. In jailing Kerik, Judge Robinson described him as, quote, a toxic combination of self-minded focus and arrogance. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Anjali Comment.
Welcome, everyone. On Capitol Hill, lawmakers are hashing out the final details of legislation to reform the nation's healthcare system. And one of the key questions is, how much will it all cost, and how will it affect the federal deficit? In the Senate, legislation giving doctors $247 billion in increased Medicare fees over the next decade nearly collapsed on Tuesday amid bipartisan concern over growing federal deficits. Meanwhile, in the House, Democratic leaders have cut the cost of their health care bill from more than $1 trillion to $871 billion over the next decade. That's according to the Washington Post. The new estimate falls well under the 10-year, $900 billion limit set by President Obama for the total cost of reform.
While $900 billion over 10 years may sound like a hefty price tag, it's a mere fraction of this country's spending on the military. Consider that the Pentagon's budget for 2010 alone is $704 billion. A new article published at TomDispatch.com helps to put the numbers in perspective. It says, according to Defense Department projections, the baseline military budget, just the bare bones, not those billions and war-fighting extras, is projected to increase by 2.5% each year for the next 10 years. In other words, in the next decade, the basic Pentagon budget will grow by at least $133.1 billion. The article is called Cashing in the War Dividend, The Joys of Perpetual War. It's written by Jo Comerford, who is the executive director of the National Priorities Project. She's joining us now from Chicopee, Massachusetts. Jo, welcome to Democracy Now! Lay out exactly what your findings are. As the big discussion is, can we afford health care in this country? The question of what the war costs.
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. So what you're saying is true, Amy, and at the top of the show you mentioned health care and the cost of college. Well, our nation doesn't take the same kind of care, it seems. Our federal budget doesn't take the same kind of due diligence care with military spending. To date, Americans have paid $915 billion for the U.S. wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. That's as of September 30th of this year. In the fiscal year 2010 budget, as you mentioned, we will pay $704 billion in military expenditures. $130 billion of that is for the U.S. wars in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Where do you come by your numbers, and why is so little known about these real costs?
Well, you know, the National Priorities Project, we've spent 2 decades, 25 years actually, this year, looking into the federal government's budget. And we look right at the primary source documents coming out from the government itself. So our researchers looked at President Obama's 2010 budget, and we looked at the numbers and added them all up. It's a job that folks have to do because these numbers should be known by everyone, as you say.
And Jo, can you talk about the states that are in debt? Their budgets are in deficit. Can you talk about the numbers? How much would it take for federal spending to give to these states?
Well, actually, one of the figures that we're looking at now is that the combined total budgets of states, of the 48 states, projected to be in deficit for 2010 is $689 billion. And when you compare that to our nation's military budget for 2010 at $704 billion, it's striking that the total state budgets, 48 states, is less than our nation's military expenditures. So, for example, for Massachusetts, we are at a $27 billion budget, $5 billion of which will be in deficit, which will mean huge cuts. For the states, it's about $160 billion for all 48 states to bring them to level funding for 2010.
You talk about the fact that every gallon of gas used in Afghanistan by the U.S. costs $400. Can you explain this number?
Well, actually, it's out of a recent report on the Hill, and it looks at the actually what they call the fully burdened cost of a gallon of gasoline in Afghanistan. And that number is at least $400 per gallon. And one of the other figures this article noted was that the Marines on average use about 800,000 gallons of gasoline every day. So this is actually an area that we're going to look more into, because this is enormous expenditure in terms of war making in Afghanistan.
Take the example of the state you're in right now, Jo Comerford. Talk about Massachusetts.
Well, Massachusetts is really struggling, as is New York State. So our governor, Governor Patrick, is having to look at not only cuts for next year, but more cuts for this year. So next year, we're projected at $5 billion in deficit. And so Governor Patrick now and the state legislature is having to make some very hard decisions. Health care for folks, elderly home care services, Head Start programs for gifted and talented students in schools. And so these things are true. At the same time, we are projected to get 17.3% less from the federal government next year in Massachusetts. So it's really a collision. And one of the things that NPP is looking at is the fact that often when we talk about state fiscal budget deficits, we really talk about declining tax bases, but we don't make the connection to federal spending in the local communities. One of the fact sheets we have out now is looks at the growth of the federal budget. So our federal budget grew over the last 7 years or so, between 2001 and 2008. It grew about 28%. And so we would expect funding for states and local communities to grow at that same rate. But in truth, they only grew 14%, while military expenditures grew 41%, or over budget. So really, as our federal budget pie grows, states and local communities are getting smaller slices of pie, while the military is getting a much larger slice.
You talk about the number 14 million children in poverty. Even if the Baucus plan or some version of it were to pass, the millions of citizens who remain without health insurance, the 7.6 million people who've lost their jobs since 2007, put this all in perspective for us.
Well, you know, if we want to say, for example, in honor of Democracy Now!, look at New York City. Since 2001, New York City has spent $30.6 billion. These are taxpayer dollars coming from New York City to fund the U.S. wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. If we want to think about health care, that's 5.6 million people in New York with health care for 1 year. Or if we want to think about our students, that's more than 1 million 4-year fully funded Pell Grants for our students. So these are enormous numbers. These are opportunity costs of our government's decision to have a huge military budget, right, the largest in the world, and to continue prosecuting these wars in Afghanistan and Iraq.
Jo, I want to turn to the issue of military recruitment. For the first time in more than 35 years, the military has announced it's met or surpassed its recruitment goals. And the National Priorities Project is one of the few organizations that tracks these numbers. Can you talk about how much the military spends per recruit?
Actually, I don't have that figure. We will have the figure once we look at this next year's recruit numbers, and that'll come in December or January this year. But it is, as you know, a very large number in terms of recruitment bonuses and recruiter salaries and all of the expenses to attract young people into service.
You talk about cashing in the war dividend. For people who are very young right now, they might not even know what you're playing on, the idea of a peace dividend and what that meant and where that has gone today.
Thank you. You're right, Amy. I date myself. What we're talking about in this is that at the end of the Cold War, there was a great deal of hope, right? The late 80s, early 90s, there was a great deal of hope that some of the money that the United States had spent on Cold War weapons, or fighting the Cold War, as it were, would be reduced. You know, some of that money would come out of the military budget and would be available then for use by Congress and the President for work in the states and local communities. So we thought that there would be a return, something that could talk about our nation now at peace, getting money back for where it really is needed, in our schools, in our healthcare systems, in transportation, infrastructure, water, the like. But as you know, that didn't happen. We didn't get the kind of return to local communities that we wanted. And so, it's important for us to hold a mirror up, really, to our federal government, to our elected officials, and say, look, $704 billion in 2010, nearly a fifth of our federal budget, 55% of all discretionary funding will go to military. And we need